This is the Rings of Power podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about the Rings of Power, Episode 8, Alloyed.
High King, wait!
I am sorry.
Grant me 3 months. I am owed that much.
You are owed nothing.
Then do it not out of recompense. Do it because I asked you.
It is a fool's hope, Elrond. Merely that, nothing more.
Hope is never mere. Not even when it is meager. Or have you forgotten your own counsel?
Welcome back, fellow Ringers, to our podcast circle. This is the Rings of Power podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we are discussing Episode 8 of the Rings of Power, Alloyed. I am one of your hosts, John.
I am your other host, Derek. Welcome back. Yeah, the finale of the Rings of Power.
Yes.
Season 1.
Season 1.
Yeah. I know there's talk that there's 5 full seasons confirmed for the show, and they're currently filming Season 2 in the UK now, as they've moved production from New Zealand to the UK. So, expecting that it'll be a little while before we get to see the show, given how much is involved in post-production after they do the filming. So, expecting it's going to be a while before we talk about the Rings of Power again.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Maybe 2024 at some point.
Yeah. I know the head of Amazon has said that she wants the show to come out on Prime Video as soon as possible. So wants a short break between each season, but it may be a little more than a year, given the size of it. But I was just thinking this morning after rewatching this episode for the third time, it's interesting that how epic it is that we've watched every episode 2 to 3 times and never once skipped the opening titles for the show. That beautiful Howard Shore theme tune for the show, and the music throughout has been fantastic. Really, really epic.
Absolutely superb.
So it's something that I'm going to miss tuning into every week for that beautiful score alone.
Yeah, definitely.
Really,
and of course, some, in terms of the actual episode, some notable absences, in terms of we don't see anything around Isildur after the him being trapped, presumed dead, after the eruption from Mount Doom. Yeah. And nothing of the Southlanders. Yeah, exactly. As they make their way to what will be Gondor.
Yeah, they do seem to be missing. It is kind of a big moment when they say where they're going to set up their new town, effectively. So that's their big moment. Put up as in episode 7. Really good stuff. I just want to give a shout out though to our theme tune for our Rings of Power podcast from Scott Holmes, who we've used a couple of times for theme tunes. I absolutely love our theme for this show.
It's really good.
I hope our fellow Ringers have enjoyed it too. So just a quick shout out, Scott Holmes. Go check out his music. It's got some really, really good stuff. And that one there is Humanity is the tune that we've used for our Rings of Power podcast.
Yes, he does really good kind of epic feeling tunes for sure.
He does.
But let us get into this finale episode with our spoiler-filled discussion. Just a quick reminder, fellow Ringers, if you're not already subscribed, please head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com so that you can subscribe to any good or evil podcast catcher of your choice. You can also search any podcast catcher that you use for TV Podcast Industries. And of course, it's been great getting your feedback in on each and every episode of this first season of The Rings of Power. If you have any thoughts on this final episode, or indeed any of the other shows that we cover, you can send your email to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We're not going to be doing a wrap-up show for the Rings of Power, but we did leave it a little bit longer to record our finale podcast, just to give a little bit of time for those bits and pieces of feedback which have come in over the last couple of days. Some great feedback has come in as well. And thanks so much for joining us for the Rings of Power podcast.
Yes. Derek, what are some of the episode details here?
Well, the season, of course, is based on the Lord of the Rings and the Appendices by Professor J.R.R. Tolkien.
Really?
It is, of course.
Excellent stuff.
And the showrunners and executive producers for the show are J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. This episode, once again, written by Gennifer Hutchison, along with showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay.
Always a good sign, as we say, on TV podcast industries.
Yeah.
The showrunners are involved in the writing of the final episode.
Exactly. And they provided the direction for how this show would take its story from those appendices of J.R.R. Tolkien as well. And this episode, once again, directed by Wayne Sheehip, who's directed a number of episodes throughout this season.
Good stuff. Yeah, he's certainly getting his paycheck.
He is, and has done an amazing job.
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
has felt so cinematic overall throughout the season. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for The Rings of Power, Episode 8, Alloyed?
Sure. In the east, the White Witches, known as the Servants of Sauron, catch up with the stranger, proclaiming him Lord Sauron, and pledging their service to him so that he may lift the veil of his enemies, so he may know himself once again and rule over the lands of Middle-earth. Nori and the Harfoots also manage to catch up with the stranger, who has been bound by the Servants of Sauron to keep him from using his powers, which he still has little control over. They manage to free him and help him realize who he really is. He is not Sauron, but one of the Istari, or wizards. They manage to fend off the Servants of Sauron, stealing the leader's staff, which the stranger then uses to banish the trio back to the shadow. Meanwhile, Galadriel and an injured Halbrand arrive in Eragon, much to the surprise of Elrond. The elvish medicine soon has Halbrand on his feet, and he seeks out Celebrimbor, the great forger, and in their discussions, Halbrand suggests a way of forging the mithril with other metals to enhance its strength. But as Celebrimbor explains what he must do to save the elves from their diminishing light, his choice of words makes Galadriel suspicious of Halbrand's keen interest in the work at the Great Forge. She checks into the royal lineages of the Southlands. As the work progresses in the forge, Galadriel confronts Halbrand with her discovery that he is not from the lineage of the Southland kings, which was broken many years ago. Halbrand reveals himself to be Sauron and infiltrates her mind to persuade her to become his queen and rule Middle-earth with him as king, but she refuses. Sauron overpowers Galadriel and flees from Eragon. Keeping what she knows from Elrond and Celebrimbor, she instructs Celebrimbor to forge 3 rings instead of 2, so that it brings balance to its holders. Elendil and Miriel arrive back to Númenor to find King Tar Palantir has died. While back amongst the Harfoots, the stranger and Nori decide to depart the group and travel east into Rhûn to find the Hermit's Hat constellation. Unsure which way to go, the stranger chooses a direction based on the sweet smell in the air, advising that when in doubt, to always follow your nose. As their adventure into the east begins, so the journey of Sauron from Eragon finishes as he reaches the land of Mordor.
So we finally know who Sauron is.
I know.
Oh, they played with us all season.
They did. And even in this episode, with that opening around the stranger and the Servants of Sauron.
Yes.
Yes, they need a catchier title, I think, the Servants of Sauron. Although maybe no longer, since they were kind of
banished.
Yeah,
banished back to the shadows. Let's talk about that.
Yes, for sure. Let us discuss the Tales of Middle-earth with our tale number 1. The Servants of Sauron and A Case of Mistaken Identity.
I know. A bit of a weird title for that one. But it's just so much going on here with the stranger finally learning, not really learning exactly who he is, but finally learning that he's not Sauron, I suppose, is the important part of this, right?
Yes. Well, possibly thinking he is Sauron, and then in a really great kind of Harfoot way being almost given agency. I love this from Nori, actually, where she says, only you know who you are. And it also chimes with whatever the Servants of Sauron seem to show him or open to his mind, which he knew he wasn't, in a sense. So I kind of really enjoyed this. I mean, firstly, I enjoyed just the fact that he could be Sauron. I mean, we were talking last week in the podcast, you know, the notion that Adar had said he had split Sauron in 2.
Yes.
And maybe that there were, you know, two halves that needed to come together.
Yeah.
And that this was ultimately one half. So actually, this to me was really plausible at the start that he could be.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this. Again, it was, in a sense, twisty-turny here from the writers, sort of thinking this was Sauron and putting it up front.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it coming to a conclusion, which I think it was also in the offing here, as he is one of the Istari, or a wise one in the tongue of the Harfoots.
Yes.
Also wizards.
A wizard,
yes,
exactly.
we have wizards.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Really good. I have to say, these scenes with the three, the ascetic, the nomad, and the dweller. I really liked each of them getting their own part in this. You know, it's one of those things where it's like this troupe of witches, effectively, all three of them, but all three of them have a purpose. Effectively, you've got the ascetic, who's the voice, who's telling all of these stories to the stranger, saying that he's Sauron, but kind of joined in that a little bit by the nomad, who is also the soldier. She's the armed part of this group. She's the one that's throwing all the daggers around. Effectively, those cool crescent-shaped daggers, looking a little like Moon Knight, but very cool. And then we have the really violent, powerful mage almost of the group with the dweller. This is the one that is able to shapeshift into looking like Nori to begin with, which I thought was a really good, horrific scene when we have the stranger following who he thinks is Nori, and then Nori just stops, the eyes change, and then there's just this great twist. It looks like almost in-camera twist, which it can't possibly be, but that twist turning into the nomad, this really creepy looking blonde creature almost, who seems to just always err on the side of violence. You know, we would see later on where she's takes out her fire to burn down the entire forest to kill all of the Harfoots. The Harfoots.
I loved that use of the eye here. You know, twice. One with Nori, and when they think that the Harfoots are unbinding and freeing the stranger again, it's the dweller again, and it's just the change of the eyes. Just really good effect. I just really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I in fact, the CGI in this was really good. I mean, I loved the whole sort of blowing the fire at the Harfoots as they're trying to distract her.
Yeah.
And just that fire then being extinguished by the stranger, and then his banishment of them using her staff back to the shadows. And you get that moth that you see with Gandalf as well form on the face of one of them.
As they all break up into the moths. Yeah, it was really cool.
It was really good.
But even the battle between the dweller and the stranger, we'll still keep calling him that, even that battle between the two of them, which felt like that Saruman versus Gandalf battle, or torture even, that Saruman was doing to Gandalf, where it's picking him up and throwing him against rocks to make him see that he's Sauron. I just loved how that was done. This idea, again, the dweller is supposed to be a servant of Sauron, but perfectly willing to pick up this character, the stranger, and bang him off rocks until he believes they're right.
He's happy to do the tough love in order to make sure that he finds his direction and takes on his mantle. For sure. No, I really like that. I mean, I was even just wondering with some of them, I think it was the one with the crescent-shaped daggers.
The nomad,
The nomad. Just the shape of the helmet elongating the face, it just immediately smacked of the voice of Sauron from The Return of the King to some extent, and I wondered if they became, the advisors around Sauron or close aides, at a future date if he brings them back from the shadow.
Well, that's it.
That was kind of, it was just trying to see who they were or could possibly become, you know, now that we know as well who Sauron is. But I thought all of this was really good. I mean, Sadok, unfortunately, gets caught with one of those crescent-shaped daggers. I actually thought he was killed outright, so it was really good that he was able to, at least before he died, was able to get the nomad in the foot with one of her own daggers. So, there's that sad element here as well, because I just thought that was really nice, where they all grouped together just to wait for the rising sun, as Sadok passes away.
Yeah, just closing his eyes for the final time. It's really sad. Like, I've really enjoyed Lenny Henry in this. I haven't seen him in very many dramas before. He's done a few, done a lot of stage work as well, but he's very well known to British audiences as a comedian over the years, and leads Comic Relief over here. He's very, very big and well-known comedy personality, but seeing him in this show, I think he provided that great gravitas for the group as their leader. Had some comedy moments, of course, as you always do with the Harfoots, but it's a really sad moment when you see him go, and I think they played even the scene where he got pierced by that crescent knife. They played that really well. It was very sad when it came out of nowhere and just took him down as he was trying to free what he thought was the stranger.
Yeah, and Poppy got a close shave as well, absolutely, being sort of pinned just by the top of her shirt to a tree. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this was really, it felt threatening from the Servants of Sauron. Oh, yeah. That, the Harfoots felt in real danger. Mm-hmm. But again, it's got the cleverness, the underestimation of halflings, effectively, that kind of notion. And you're wondering if this is, we don't know whether the stranger or the Istari here is actually Gandalf, even though he does use a very well-known phrase, of always follow your nose. He does. Which is used by Gandalf, in The Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as you say, the moth coming up in the face, the power in his voice, even when he's sending them back to the shadows, feels very Gandalf-like. But we have no confirmation that it is Gandalf. No, it's still possible to be another one of the Istari. There are other ones in existence here. As we know, the show doesn't have access to the Silmarillion. The story is that Gandalf didn't arrive in the first stage, that he arrived in the second age, but we're going to see how the show plays it out. We'll probably know more in the second season. I'm still questioning whether there are behind the scenes negotiations going on to get the rights to the Silmarillion so they can either call him Gandalf or another one of the Istari. I just wonder if they were holding back, going, let's see how successful this is. Let's see if the estate like what we've done with the first season, and maybe they'll take another 100 million quid for the rights to it.
Well, exactly.
but we don't know how the episode ends with Gandalf and the Harfoots as they pack up their bags and start to go on their new nomadic trip without any caravans anymore, because they were all burnt by the Dweller in the last episode. As they're all setting off one way and the stranger is going off another way, and Nori goes with them. I really liked how that played out, because that has been the story of the season, that Nori's someone that is completely separate from the rest of the group. She's more of an adventurous, very similar to Bilbo or Frodo, as we've seen in the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit.
She doesn't want to be constrained by the migratory paths of the Harfoots.
Yeah.
The annual cycles of the same thing.
Yeah.
Year in, year out. Yeah. She's looking beyond those pathways that they travel, and I really liked this. I mean, it was a shame Poppy wasn't going with her. I really was hoping Poppy was going to go with her, but I absolutely loved their goodbyes to one another. I think the two actors were just really great here. I mean, I don't know their age. I don't know whether they are sort of teenagers or whether they're adults at this stage and just, playing younger. But I just thought it was really emotional. It felt really, really meaningful, this split of two really good friends. Even when Poppy says to Nori, stay close to the big fella. He's good in a tight spot.
Absolutely.
And she's like, yeah, but not as good as my best friend. Yeah. it was just really, really nicely done from these two actors.
It was.
I really loved it.
It really was just a lovely scene, and Poppy is just so cute. There's a real cuteness to her face with Nori, and you can see that Nori's a little bit more experienced and a little bit more adventurous, as we said. I felt there was a little indication that Poppy might take over from Cedric Burrows as the one who's guiding the path for everybody, because at that moment where Malva is reading the map upside down and telling them, it's all clear from here, all downhill, no problems at all. And Poppy's kind of going, you need to turn the map upside down. It's going to be brambles and uphill for the next 3 months, basically. And Malva's kind of saying, well, if you're so good at reading maps, why don't you be the one to guide us? And there's just this little look that comes across Poppy's face where it looks as if that would be the perfect position for her at the lead of this group, leading them in that kind of chant of nobody goes off trail, nobody's left behind kind of thing. It feels like she has got a position ready for her.
I think as well, the other two little touches around that were, when Malva is giving that instruction of the Harfoots that, no one is left behind, no one goes off trail, that, there's just that little remembrance of Sadok, that he could say that so much, better. It felt right coming from him. She felt sort of a bit awkward saying it and being in this position, having lost Sadok. But I love that they just touch his tone. Like he's still there with them in his writings and the book that he was looking after. I really like that. And I just also really enjoyed just the goodbye between Nori and her father Largo as well. Just the whole sort of putting the foreheads together and so on, and Nori saying, I always listen to what you said, I thought that was really nice. I just thought this was really so well done, this goodbye as Nori heads off with the Istari and on their journey,
Absolutely, I have to say that hug between the family was something it was beautifully done.
It really was.
It really gave me a little tear to my eye as they bid farewell, because you know how dangerous this place is now. The Istari and Nori are heading off to Rhûn, which is quite near to Mordor. It's quite near to what's just happened in Mordor. So they're going to be going through quite a big adventure in quite a dangerous place. So when Nori's promising that she will definitely come back to Poppy, you're wondering whether there's going to be some big difficulties before they get to return to each other. But,
absolutely. Of course, then there is the beginning of this journey into the east to Rhûn. And by the way, I should say adventure.
Yes.
Not journey. Journey is just where you're on your own. An adventure is where there is two or more people with you sharing in that journey. So I really enjoyed this, because we get the name of that constellation, the Hermit's Hat, that is described by the Servants of Sauron. One of them having a big stone kind of tablet on her back that has the markings of this constellation as well, that the Istari is looking for, but seemingly a place where maybe it's evil or has darkness and shadow, because it's where the Servants of Sauron say this is where you will command your powers and you will be able to fulfill your role to command all things and all people. So it's interesting that the stranger is then going off in that direction to Rhûn, which is in the east. Just above Mordor, in fact, and to the right.
Heading to his Rhûn, exactly. But I suppose there's kind of two ways to see it. They thought he was Sauron, so they were sending him off there to learn more about being Sauron and command his armies. But I suppose if he is an Ishtar, or one of the Istari sent to combat against Sauron, well, then he knows he's going off to face Sauron in those lands. So there's kind of two ways that it could be going there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, since his arrival in the meteorite, he's been looking for this constellation. One other tiny thing just to mention, which I really liked in this episode,
the Servants of Sauron do kind of mention that there was a veil put in the mind of the stranger when he arrived, and they've now lifted the veil. That's what they've done. So you see a much more confident character by the end of the episode. He feels like he's able to form full sentences and have full conversations and understand what's going on much more than he did before, even though he still doesn't know exactly who he is. I just like that that's part of this visitation, I guess, from the three.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let us move to tale number 2, The Elven Rings of Power.
Well, it is the name of the TV show, so we were expecting that it would have to have something to do with creating the Rings of Power. I was hoping that it wasn't going to be in season 5. Suddenly, the Rings of Power are created, but we have kind of the big story here of the creation of the 3 Elven Rings of Power.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this was really tense. I really enjoyed just seeing Galadriel sort of move into suspicion around Halbrand on the basis of Celebrimbor repeating those words that Galadriel heard from Adar about when he says it's a power not of the flesh but over the flesh. You know, immediately alarm bells for Galadriel, and we see Halbrand. We know he's a smithy, taking real interest with Celebrimbor as being this master of metalwork and forging.
But he's such a flatterer as well. It's the way that he speaks to Celebrimbor, where he's saying, oh, I could never be as good as you. My masters told me how amazing your work is. I'm just a moderate smithy. And you can see it on Celebrimbor's face that he's really enjoying the praise that he's getting from Halbrand. Again, this going back to the creation of these rings, it's known that Sauron had a hand in the guidance of how they were created by the elves, and then eventually creates the one ring to rule them all. That's the central story. So this idea of having Halbrand here, him getting so enmeshed in the creation with Celebrimbor, by giving him some ideas as to how he can work with this very tiny amount of mithril.
It's the trail of breadcrumbs, isn't it, really? That Celebrimbor sort of takes up, really, in terms of to use other ores in order to amplify these qualities within mithril. I really enjoyed the bit where Halbrand takes up as he describes, the strange ore. And you see Celebrimbor being a little bit nervous, and Halbrand doesn't give it back immediately. I mean, he does in the end, but it just seems like drawn out, and that felt a real kind of like an anxiousness form in that scene from Celebrimbor. It was just really nicely done. And that's the thing. I mean, it's such an epic show with the vistas and all of that, but sort of so many small moments done absolutely fantastically for me. I mean, even when we have Galadriel asking, one of the elves to go into the archives to find out about the kings of the Southlands. And, before she's received that parchment from them, as she's giving the elf the instruction, you see Celebrimbor walking past, and she kind of hides from him and then comes out, and then Halbrand is there, and we just have that real moment between the two of them, where she says, our scales are balanced, and he's like, no, I had given up, you pushed me, set me to new heights. I'll see to it that everyone knows of it, that you gave me new purpose, effectively. So it was just so nicely done, because in a sense it was a compliment, but it was just delivered so darkly, and with the frame of mind that Galadriel was in, with this suspicion. It was just really pitch perfect. It was,
and I have complimented Bear McCreary for his work on the music for the show. I do think this was a little bit heavy-handed, the darkness of the music underneath the words that he was saying, because there is no doubt that it's Sauron talking to Galadriel, telling her, it's your fault that I'm here, and I'm going to take over the lands of the Middle Earth, and I'm going to make sure everybody knows that. It was just the music underneath that felt really like, dun dun dun, here's the big bad moment for the episode. Here's your big bad, in case you don't know yet. But I liked, because we had the other story being interspersed with this, with the stranger and the servants of Sauron. And at this point in the story, first time watching it, you think, oh, it's been revealed that he's Sauron. So you're taken away a little bit from the idea that it could be Halbrand as Sauron, I think.
And I mean, the suspicions could have been unfounded as well. And for me, given the cleaved in two talk from Adar, I was thinking, well, it could also be Halbrand.
And the two of them have to meet and merge to become Sauron again or something.
Know it, and he in a sense, is a passenger that needs to be sort of forged with the stranger. So there was that whole element. I think, talking of forging as well, I loved the phrase that Celebrimbor says about that Mithril is proud. It refuses our efforts to fuse it, as the forge kind of, the kiln, it blows up because the amount of pressure they're trying to put on Mithril in order for it to fuse and meld with the other ores. But again, this leads to Halbrand adding more suggestion here, is that there's been too much force and it needs to be drawn or coaxed together, so they start down a different path. And I just thought it was a really nice way of describing the elves working with this new ore in Mithril. And also, again, this is the thing about personal theories, isn't it, that you pick up when you're watching a show, because I was like going, oh, that's a nice metaphor for what needs to happen between the stranger and Halbrand to an extent.
That idea that they could merge together and become Sauron. That's an interesting one.
And just the title of the episode being Alloyed, the mixing of different ores in order to improve and enhance the properties of both ores. That the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the individual constituents. So I really kind of was buying into this big time.
Absolutely. And one of the things I did, like you mentioned a second ago, about the way Galadriel is starting to get concerned about Celebrimbor. There's a really interesting moment when she poses that to him. Was it Halbrand that told you that? Did he give you those words? Was he in the room? And it almost reminded me of Bilbo Baggins when he's approached about where he's left the ring, where he thinks he's lost it, and there's suddenly this kind of memory loss of Celebrimbor, as if something like Halbrand has put a veil over him to make him think that all of these thoughts are his, that he doesn't know he's been guided down this path by Halbrand. Which I really liked, is just how it was delivered by Celebrimbor, where he's going, well, no, I think it was me and the other elven smiths and I'm the one, I think, said that, not Halbrand. It's like as if Sauron has been able to get into his mind and encourage him down the path he wants him to go, which I thought was interesting. Let's stick with the actual creation of the rings, because it is actually Galadriel who suggests this idea that we can't have one ring or two. If you have one ring, then it corrupts. If you have two rings, then there's going to be a battle between the two holders of those, a divide between the two. And then if you have three rings, at least there'll be balance between the holders of those rings of power.
Yes, exactly.
So that's quite an interesting one.
No, it is. I mean, and there is absolute sense in that, in terms of, you always have, I guess it's like, doing maths, you have a standard deviation. You need at least 3 sample points,
there you go,
I guess.
That's a bit of science.
In order just to provide the boundaries of that mean figure. Anyway, I'll stop talking about maths. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was really nice, the way she describes that. I loved in this as well, just given the reveal before this, she's kind of a little nervous as well. You get, she's on edge because she doesn't tell Elrond or Celebrimbor what has just happened. It is about, you just need to trust me. While she's very direct that if Halbrand ever comes back, you're not to treat with him. There's no context being provided.
Absolutely.
I love the fact that Elrond probably has suspicions as he goes back to the place where Galadriel confronts Halbrand and finds the record that she had asked for. So he's probably got his suspicions.
I think
there.
He knows. I think he knows, because he was told when Galadriel arrived that she was with the King of the Southlands, and this is the history of the Kings of the Southlands. Is quite clear that it stops 1,000 years ago. So there's nothing of him. We will talk about that in a second. But effectively, it feels like Galadriel has guided them to kind of almost throw out what Sauron wanted them to do and create the 3 rings, almost like a new plan. It's take the basis of what he said to you about how to create them, but he wanted to have one ring to begin with, well, a crown to begin with, then 2 rings. That was his plan. And she's now saying, well, actually, if we have 3 rings, then we've separated that power. All 3 of them will be powerful, and not one person will be the ruler. You won't have people battling between which one is the ruler if there's just 2. So it's like as if Galadriel has kind of gone, without telling them, don't follow Sauron's exact plan. She's saying, we still need this. We still need this to allow the elves to continue living in Middle Earth. But here's a new plan that'll allow us to accentuate and make it better what he was suggesting.
It buffers the elves from corruption and division with having the 3.
Yes.
And again, with the 3 different types of stones as well that are inlaid into the rings. Again, that is this notion of balance, as well.
Yes, it is. And that comes from the idea of Celebrimbor, that what he's trying to approximate is what happened in Valinor, the creation of the Silmarils, which were representations of Valinor, things that drew the very essence of Valinor, as he says, and he wants to do the same for Middle-earth here. He wants to create something that is of the essence of Middle-earth. So the 3 stones that he's got there represent fire, water, and air, the 3 major elements in Middle-earth. That's the concept that he has. So obviously blue, white, and red that he has there, which is cool. So the actual rings themselves, Vilya, Narya, and Nenya are the 3 rings that he's created here, and the 3 of them are representing different elements, effectively. Yeah. They all have various owners over the years, but we know Galadriel was wearing one of them by the time of Lord of the Rings, by the Third Age. She is wearing one of those rings. So at the moment, I can't see why she would be given one of the 3 rings. No. Although, being that she's involved in the creation here, I can see maybe they give her one of the rings in this story, because this will be different from the original creation of the Rings of Power in the books and in the appendices. It will be slightly different than that, but it's entirely possible for the TV show you could justify her getting one of the rings.
Exactly.
So I know there's a little criticism out there. There's people that are pulling this stuff apart because it's not exactly the same as the books. They are trying to tell a narrative from, unfortunately, not having availability of the Silmarillion. But I think the story that they've told throughout this season of the relationship between the dwarves and the elves, the finding of Mithril for the first time, and the elves being the ones that created the rings, which is all similar to the story. But I think the fact that the elves are creating the rings to save themselves makes sense why they would create these 3 rings first.
Yes.
Whereas my understanding is that it's the other way around. They create the rings for the humans, for the men. They create the rings for the dwarves, and then they create their own 3 rings uncorrupted by Sauron's creation, and then he makes the 1 ring to rule them all. So I'm not too precious about that personally. I think it make the
precious. Well, some people are.
Some people are, yes. But I think this makes sense for the story they're trying to tell here.
It does for me as well, to be honest.
I just can't see why Celebrimbor would make rings for the kings of men at this stage, especially because they have hardly any treaty with the men right now. You'd have to uncover 8 different kingdoms or 10 different kingdoms of men. Then you'd have to uncover all 8 kingdoms of dwarves in order to explain why you're doing it. So that feels like something you'd do the other way around over the course of the story.
That's it. I mean, at this moment in time, really the only kingdom of men that we've had any sort of, that is powerful at least, is Numenor.
Yeah.
Even the Southlands, it's more a faded kingdom because of their defeat
with no leader
with Morgoth at the time and allying there. So it makes sense to me as well. And I mean, you just know that there are these other rings to be forged in time.
Yeah.
And as you say, you can see that word gets out about these 3 rings, that you have. That the dwarves hear about it and are looking to have that same kind of power in their own way and for their own purposes, and also then for men.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. I think the other thing I really liked on this was just the use of Galadriel's brother's dagger for the gold and the silver. This idea that creation requires sacrifice. So it felt really meaningful. This is the last bit of her brother that she's held on to for years.
Yeah.
And she uses it for the creation of these 3 rings, which will save the elves, even though it's that last physical, connection to her brother.
And not only that, she's been driven by it. She's been driven by that connection to her brother for the entire time. And this dagger has represented her mission. She gave away her sword last episode to Theo. So this dagger is the last thing that she had left of the battling spirit, effectively, that she's used to try and go after Sauron for this long. We do have to talk about it now. Let's talk about Halbrand's reveal and how it was done in the episode.
He is Lord Sauron.
He is.
And he knows it. That's the interesting.
Yes, absolutely. He's fully aware of who he is, although I do like how he plays with it and goes, well, I've had many names. I've been here since the beginning of time, effectively.
Yeah.
But I've had many names. So if you want to call me Sauron, go ahead. It's one of them.
Yeah, I really love that line. I have been around since the first silence. In that time, I've had many names.
Yes.
Really good. I love the fact as well that, immediately, without question, this driven nature of Galadriel in terms of that we saw in, the first episode, trying to hunt down Sauron, who, was the right-hand man of Morgoth, killed her brother, and immediately tries to knife him in the neck. And I just loved the way, just how calmly he stops her, in that moment, almost without any effort, but with inexhaustible supply of strength to hold her hand and stop the knife from going into his neck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the perversion, I suppose, as you mentioned earlier on, the perversion of their story together.
Yeah.
How he turns it all to be Galadriel's fault. It's, but we fought side by side. Yes, but we fought your enemies and also my enemies side by side. That idea, you saved me on the raft. I would have drowned otherwise. And he was saying, well, no, I was already giving up on my life. If I hadn't taken you on board, I would be dead. So it's all that idea where he's trying to twist it all and turn it all into something where he's in the right. We talk about it often on our podcast about this idea that the villain doesn't think of themselves as a villain. The villain thinks of their story as being the hero, because everybody's a hero in their own story. And he uses his power of getting inside Galadriel's mind for this really interesting trip through the past, with her trying to show her actually he's trying to save Middle-earth, and if she just sides with him, then Middle-earth will be saved, and then they can rule together. And she's kind of going, but that's the problem, I don't want to become a ruler of Middle-earth. I want to help Middle-earth and save them without that moment of being in charge of everything.
She poses that question, is it to save or to rule? And Sauron says there is no difference. Yeah. And that answers the question for her, and why she says that is why you'll never have me.
Exactly.
I loved the stuff on the boat where Halbrand seems to command the sea, sort of turning it into a mill pond and then whipping up a storm. But that moment where it's the mill pond and the camera pans around and you just get this reflection. And for that brief moment, you have Sauron there with Galadriel as he's trying to show, as he says, I'm your friend. She's like, no, a friend of Morgoth. Yeah. But you kind of get the sense here, Morgoth's death released me from his grasp, that there was this control from Morgoth. It's kind of that idea, a bit like with the orcs, We've talked about this season with the orcs having some agency, certainly with Adar, where he's like treating them like individuals, his people that can make their own decisions, can live how they want to, yet you transpose that to Lord of the Rings and they are effectively, they're just foot soldiers. Yeah. There's only very few with agency, but it's still all command and control from Sauron. Yeah. And here you get that sense that Morgoth had that over Sauron. Yeah. And when it links to what her brother says about Sauron's task was also to bring peace, seeking a power to heal Middle-earth and not to destroy it. And then it comes into this save or rule. And Sauron, again, as I said, sees no difference in that. So it's a real neat way, as you say, of Sauron believing his task is justified and is good in a sense. He doesn't see it as a perversion. I really liked when Halbrand here talks about Galadriel being this light, and it's almost the yin and yang element, another form of balance. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? We have Galadriel talking about 3 rings will bring balance because 2 will divide, but here on a dichotomy element, that the balance of the darkness and the light.
Yes.
And he goes, you bind me to light and I bind you to power.
Yes.
So I really, really love just the whole sentiments of this sort of dream scape that came in. It really added depth to Sauron. Because, I mean, in Lord of the Rings, he's the big bad.
Yeah.
And primarily off screen.
Exactly.
And there's just... you get sense of his motivation from his enemies. I like Gandalf, it's his will to dominate. And this is to rule, to command, to own all these things, and to take away agency. So I think it will be really interesting with, where we see Sauron / Halbrand finally making it to Mordor.
Yes.
And knowing that Adar is there, that has seemingly no love for Sauron.
He killed him.
And has different views on how you would treat what you would consider, in inverted commas, the forces of darkness in the orcs.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've heard specifically from Halbrand here, from Sauron here, that is his enemy. Adar is his enemy. He's called it out. Obviously he killed him, so we understand that he is the enemy of Sauron, even though he's the leader of the orcs and also an enemy of men. So I really like that. I do also think that moment of him sharing what it would be like to have Sauron and Galadriel side by side as leaders obviously had a big impact on Galadriel, because that's what she's almost referring to in Lord of the Rings. When Frodo offers to give her the ring, she's referring to, well, if I took it, you would have a queen, but a queen of such darkness and such power that I would rule the entirety of Middle Earth. So she pushes it away. So this is her first refusal of the offer, effectively, to rule Middle Earth. So that obviously stays with her for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Understandably.
And I think as well, the final thing for me is just when Galadriel refuses his offer, I love the fact that, true to form, I guess, Sauron says, what do you think the elves will do when they realize you saved me? It almost like this threat. And it just influenced how Galadriel was with Elrond and Celebrimbor back at Eragon. I just thought it was a great line, that connection of that threat. I think he starts it with, they effectively banished you for just asking for a few extra men to hunt me down, and now you've saved me. And it was just so good. It felt really, really powerful. And I mean, really meaningful as well, because in those scenes with Elrond and Celebrimbor, you get this sense from Galadriel, just that she is being very, very careful with her words so as not to implicate her. And I mean, I think Morfydd Clark just was so good here.
Absolutely.
Really, really good.
I think both of them are. I think Charlie Vickers does a great job of this twist, because, you know, we've liked the character of Halbrand.
Yeah.
You know, you're supposed to like him, this lovable rogue from the beginning who's a bit down in his luck, you know, a very hot looking guy from the beginning. That's the point of the character. And interestingly, when the character of Halbrand was revealed, the showrunners were saying, oh, he's created specifically for the Rings of Power, trying to kind of push you away from thinking he could be Sauron. But I wonder, did he know when he came on board right at the beginning that he is going to become Sauron at the end, or did he think he was being cast as the character of Halbrand and it came to him over the course of getting the scripts that he's being revealed as Sauron? Because a lot of times when people go out and audition for roles, the people who are auditioning them know exactly what they're doing with the character, but they may not know themselves as actors what exact role they're playing. But there have been little hints along the way as to who the character is. But if you don't know that story of Sauron, that idea that he's come back to Middle Earth to be punished, that he's here and doesn't want to go to Middle Earth itself, that he wants to stay in Numenor.
Yeah.
If you didn't know that story, then you may not know that this is going to be Sauron. But of course, that has been the story of the season. Who is it? So we have that big reveal in this episode.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
really, really well done. I loved that transition in the vision that he's got inside Galadriel's head with her brother, and it's this really kind conversation between the two of them, and then it transitions to this "look at me" shout as they go to the raft. I think there's a real powerful moment there as we kind of have a reveal of how dark Sauron can go with her. I thought that was cool.
Definitely.
Lots to talk about in those two first points. So our final tale is probably a bit smaller.
Yes, it is Tar Palantir's passing. Effectively, we know he's unwell, and indeed you have Chancellor Pharazôn getting all the great draftsmen and apprentices, of which Elendil's daughter is one of them, in order to sketch him so that they may build, a monument to his life, to his greatness that in stone, that surpasses anything that a living person could embody. These great, tall statues carved out of cliffs of the Númenórean kings.
Yeah.
And
can you imagine how that must feel if you're an apprentice like Arian is? You're basically being told that if you create the right vision of the king here, then we will create something out of that will last for millennia. You'll have a stone statue out of a mountain, based on your drawings as an apprentice draftsman. Like it feels like such a big moment. That's why she's so focused and spending her time. They all get an hour with the king, with Tar Palantir to make their drawings and get some ideas and inspiration, with him. And it turns really weird. This idea that he's kind of losing his mind. We saw that before, but we understand why now. He thinks that Arian is his daughter. He thinks she's the queen regent and speaks to her in that way.
Yeah.
And we find that the reason why he's done that is because he spent so long looking into this Palantir that he holds, which tells the past, the future, and what could be. He's looked so long into that he's lost his mind. He's lost his way. Everything is merging together.
Yes, exactly. And we do see her go up into the secret room and draw away the cloth that is covering the Palantir. And it's left at that. It cuts away before we see the Palantir. Really nice cut there in the edit from my side. So we don't know what she's done. We're guessing she has actually looked to see what the Palantir is, at least, and probably interacted with it.
And I wonder what has been revealed, because from the king's side, from Tar Palantir's side, what he's saying is what's been revealed to him is if they don't go back to the old ways being connecting back up with the elves again, not being separated from the world. If they don't do that, then the entirety of Númenor will fall. So that's what's been revealed to him. But maybe that's because he's the leader. I wonder if what Arian has seen is her brother. Has she seen Isildur is still alive? And that puts them back on the trip back to Middle-earth to try and find Isildur? Is it something like that? Because it would maybe a different vision for her that she sees in the Palantir. But it's interesting they didn't show us. It's interesting that we don't see whether she sees the fall of Númenor or whether she sees something more personal to her for her vision.
Yeah. Absolutely. But the other big side of this is that as Elendil and Miriel come back into Númenor, we see all the black flags as the king has died.
I totally got this wrong.
No, me too. I thought it was going to be on fire or sort of destroyed, that something had happened for sure. And it was only watching it the second time and we hear Chancellor Pharazôn talking about the black flags once the king is dead, to recognize to the ceremonial side of it that then this made sense. All these black flags.
I just thought it was an invading army because the flags looked different. I thought somebody had come in and attacked Númenor while their major army was away fighting this battle in Middle-earth, because that happens quite often in these types of fantasy shows or these types of medieval type shows where they've sent off their forces to do a war, and because they're gone, an attack has happened. So it's like, oh wow, what happened? Who attacked? Oh, actually, no, it's not. It's nothing like that.
I mean, this is all kind of the precursor of this is Elendil and Muriel's conversation, which I really, really enjoyed, because it Elendil seemed to be quite anti-Galadriel here, but he says, about his name, which we had earlier in the season, it does mean more than one who loves the stars. It also means elf friend. Yes. And we hear that Elendil's actions in terms of rescuing Galadriel from the sea, and everything he has done, has been based around this. And he goes, I didn't imagine it would lead to here, with the loss of his son, Isildur, the death of a number of soldiers, this incursion to protect the Southlanders. And this notion, just before they realize that the king is dead, is the costs that they are paying, is it worth the price? And that we need to make the price worth it. It is this idea of almost the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, that he's sort of suggesting here, that yes, everything has a cost, but is the price worth it in the end? And
it's quite a big price that the Queen has paid as well. Queen Regent is blind,
and now lost her father. Yeah,
exactly. So quite a significant price that she's paid for following this lead from Galadriel and Sauron, effectively.
Yes.
So that's quite an interesting place that we leave the Númenóreans, who were quite a powerful nation before they treated with the elves again, before Galadriel convinced them of the way to go. So we'll see how they go next season, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's it for all the major tales of this episode. Any notes, anything else that we want to call out? Just a slightly funny note for me that I thought was interesting. Do you know when they were having the conversation with Gil-galad to try and convince him that they were going to create this one item of power that would sit atop his head? They were saying that they were going to create a crown.
Yes.
And Celebrimbor explains that a crown, being a circular item, will be able to have light coming from all angles and will get all the power in. I just thought it was quite funny that Gil-galad's crown that he's wearing at the time isn't a circle. It's broken. It's effectively
like a tiara type look.
Yeah, but I just thought it was interesting that they were talking about a crown to a king wearing a crown who didn't have a circular crown on his head. I just thought, why not have his crown be circular?
But that might be his day-to-day crown.
It might be. It might be. Yes, his crown of laurels, isn't it? It's kind of like like the Greek crown, I guess. Yeah. But I don't know why. It just made me laugh that they were telling him, well, a real crown would be circular, king, not the kind of one you're wearing. Anyway, I think that was it for notes from me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only note from my side is, in a sense, we have Galadriel and Elrond making peace with each other.
Yes.
I think, it's important just to kind of flag that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Best friends again. And I do love when they meet up and they're both thinking, hang on a second, why are you here? Galadriel, you're not supposed to be even in this plane anymore. Yeah. You're supposed to be gone. And then they go, we're going to need to talk. And then it cuts because you can't have all that exposition on screen, right? They're going to go off for 3 weeks and discuss what's happened.
Exactly. So then, Derek, did you enjoy the final episode of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 1, Episode 8, Alloys?
I have absolutely loved my time back in Middle-earth. I've absolutely loved it. I thought this was a great end to the show. I like the twists and turns, especially because they were feeding into some of the ideas we had earlier on in the season. I kind of really enjoyed that opening moment where you think, hang on a second, the stranger's Sauron and he's been hanging out with the lovely Harfoots for the last 7 weeks, I thought there was some good little horror pieces in there at the start as well. That was really good. The actual reveal that Halbrand is Sauron makes total sense in the story. But I love the agency it gives to Galadriel to help create these 3 rings of power.
Yes.
So yes, I loved how this all formed into this great story at the end of the season. It's been really enjoyable. I'm really looking forward to hearing other people that are jumping on board now and going to binge these 8 episodes and what they think of the introduction to Middle-earth now that it's been complete. Really, really enjoyed it. I'm going to really miss not having episodes of this for a while, for a year and a half possibly, maybe a bit more, because it has been possibly one of the best shows that we've covered this year, I'd say, outside of The Sandman.
Yeah.
This is probably my favourite show that we've covered.
Excellent stuff.
How about yourself, John? What did you think of the final episode?
Yeah, I absolutely love this. I'd give it 5 ascetics out of 5.
Nice.
I just thought it was a really, really good conclusion to this first season. And it kept you guessing with, the stranger being set up as Lord Sauron by the Servants of Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
I loved just the epicness of all of this. I mean, I thought the infiltration of Halbrand or Sauron into Galadriel's mind, I thought that was just exquisitely done. I think it linked so well together. We got the formation of 3 of the Rings of Power with the Elven Rings. And I just thought this was so good. Again, the intimate moments as well, though, it's interspersed amongst this, the action, as you say, the slight hints at horror, with the Servants of Sauron, really good, as I say, in particular with Nori and Poppy and her, father Largo. I loved, these small moments with Galadriel. I actually just thought Murford Clark was so good here in that rising suspicion, then the resoluteness when confronted with Sauron, in her mind, and then that kind of, nervousness of what she's done and not letting on effectively, given the threat from Halbrand, about what the elves would do, if they realized that you saved me.
Yeah.
This was all just superb. I can't wait to see the next season of this and to spend the time in Middle-earth again. So, absolutely, 5 ascetics out of 5, for me.
Absolutely, yeah. I have to say it, well, we didn't really say it, but Eregion, I thought was absolutely beautiful. The forge they built there, I love. There's a cut to the overview of it as the smoke is billowing out of the sides of the forge. I thought that was really cool. They didn't spare any budget throughout the season, as we've said. It does feel like a part of that Middle Earth we've seen before in Peter Jackson's films.
Definitely.
Like
I think one of the other things that maybe don't think we mentioned was Halbrand on the boat, where he talks that Galadriel said, your past doesn't matter. It's the future.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's almost like him being forgiven for what he had done when bound to Morgoth. Yes. And so that was kind of an interesting moment as well on the raft in the mind of Galadriel and that conversation.
Yeah, it was like as if Sauron had been forgiven for all his past, which allows him this idea that he can now go and save Middle-earth in his version of trying to save Middle-earth. But yeah, even that final moment where we see him arriving in Mordor and it cuts from the Rings of Power into his eye where he's seeing Mount Doom for the first time and he's got that kind of evil looking smile on his face. But I love that cut between the Rings of Power beginning and him arriving in Mordor. I thought that was a great way to end the season.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. Oh, I could talk about this episode and this show way more, but we do have lots of feedback to talk about. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the show.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, let us get into our episode 8 feedback. First off, we have a voicemail from Dr. Bob Phillips.
The finale. Gosh, what an episode. I mean, surely the scary ghost elves had to be wrong. We couldn't have been letting the pretty little not hobbits take care of someone that was that evil, could they? Could they? And then the confusion in me grew, and I thought, I don't remember any of this. This is awful. Surely nobody that can command apples to grow like that can actually be evil. But then what about the evil witch with her scary poisoned apple? And then fortunately, at the end, nobody is nasty to my hobbitses, and out emerges the wizard we knew he was all along. And the beauty of that storyline gets finished off as they wander off into the sunset. Nori and Istar standing by a tree. ADVENT N-T-U-R-A-I-N-G. Yeah, it doesn't work quite so well. Anyway, that was a cracker. And whilst our elven storyline should potentially have ended with the bangles of power because that would have led on to more singing, instead, the 3 rings of red, white and blue are, well, is it actually a dig at the entirety of the British Empire? The fact that they created them to peace on earth by ruling over it, but actually it's really just not a good idea? I don't know, but maybe I'm reading too much into that. Anyway, the other bit of that storyline that I thought was particularly powerful was, yes, that is basically the only way you get librarians to do things for you is by making it into a secret quest. Don't let any librarians I work with know that that's the case. Oh, and one small medical point from the episode. If you throw somebody that hard into a rock, then please do activate the major head injury protocol. Don't just leave them there and hope that a hobbit and magic makes them better. Thank you so much for taking us through this episode, for educating us, for all the other ringers that have added so much fun into this. I have delighted in this in a way that I didn't think I would. Anyway, on to the next series and more excellent TV podcast industries. Thanks all.
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bob.
It's been great getting your voicemails throughout the season. We don't get them very often from Dr. Bob. I know, very busy guy. So I'm really glad he's been able to send in feedback throughout the season. Absolutely.
And yeah, I totally agree around the storyline of the Harfoots and that. It was really, really so well done. Mm-hmm. R.I.P. Sadok, of course.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if you making librarians feel they're on a quest is maybe due to a preponderance of D&Ders that might reside there, or even facilitating other D&Ders in the library in those kind of book-orientated games.
Absolutely. I love it.
And certainly I know when I would go into libraries as a kid, it was always a quest having to run through the card files at the time in order then to find the row, the shelf, and see if the book was actually there.
Excellent. Good stuff. Support your local libraries.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for your thoughts, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, thanks again. We also got an email in from Coffee and Vodka. Greetings, fellow thrice-rung defenders. Well, that was something. I'm through guessing anything about anything when it comes to the appendices or this show. Who had Halbrand pegged, so to speak, as Sauron? Even after witnessing much of his acolytes' brutal worship, thinking the stranger to be him, our faithful Nori knew better. Mm-hmm. Watching the pair of them walk off together caused me all heart to fit, oh swelling. And the final shirred sunrise of the Elder couldn't have been more sweet, sad, and touching. Mm-hmm. If this show were just about Istari and Nori from this point forward, I'd be as happy as Schmeagol rolling around in a pile of one rings. As for the rest, so much to build on and fill in over 4 or 5 more confirmed seasons. Any chance of some of that goodwill could be spurred to the Sandman? Just wondering. 5 ill-fated Isildurs, black-sailed harbours, and gullible Galadriels out of 5. Peace and take care, Coffee and Vodka. Thank you so much, Coffee and Vodka. Certainly we know season 2 is on the way and has started production. And I think the showrunners have indicated this is a 5-season arc, and given the reception of this show, given some of the numbers that have been released, certainly a couple of weeks back now, I'm guessing that Prime Video will certainly be stumping up more to get this back on their platform as soon as possible, let alone the fact that their head honcho is like mad for it, basically.
Yeah, he's a massive fan.
Yeah.
I did love that quote before the series was released from Jeff Bezos' son, where he apparently told him, don't F it up, because he's a massive fan. So even the family involvement, they're pushing it to be the best show it could possibly be. Excellent stuff. Thanks, Coffee and Vodka. You're totally right. Those scenes as well with the Harfoots were really touching. They really created that heart of the show. While everything else is going on at kind of this upper level, you really feel the family of the Harfoots throughout. Thanks so much, Coffee and Vodka. We also have an email in from Gail Cleary. She says, "Hi everyone. Well, it's with a bit of a heavy heart that I'm sending feedback on the last episode for possibly 2 years. But based on this first season, I think it will be well worth the wait. This adaptation has been a wonderful exploration of Middle-earth. I keep reminding myself this is only the first season and all the artists involved are just in the process of finding their groove, learning to collaborate and growing their vision of Tolkien's world. I can't wait to see what things will look like by next season when they've really gelled as a team. Speaking of gelling, let's talk about how things are blended up to achieve the desired properties in the final episode and perhaps find some answers to the most important question. Who are you? First up, the Stranger. This is both the most delightful and potentially most problematic character to ponder. The Fire Sisters revealed that the Stranger had a veil placed in his mind when he was cast down. Well, if he was cast down by celestial beings, that may well be true. However, it is also equally likely that he was sent down as Nori imagines, and that losing memory is simply part of the process of transitioning from one realm to the next. The Stranger is placed in the immediate position of having to choose whether he is evil or good. For the moment, he listens to Nori, who tells him labels don't matter. The question is not really who you are, but what you do. Aristotle would be proud. And luckily, the Stranger also agrees and uses his staff to send the Fire Sisters back to the hell they came from. More problematically, they strongly tip the hat, or the nose as it were, that the Stranger is Gandalf. It's too early for Gandalf. He doesn't appear until the Third Age. I was hoping beyond hope that the Stranger was a blue wizard like Radagast or even Saruman, who started off good and was later corrupted. From the point of view of fans who only watch the movies, I can see why the showrunners would be tempted to make the Stranger Gandalf. This will be a tectonic change, though, not to say they won't do good things with it, and Gandalf is the best wizard in literature, but I have some reservations about this. On to Galadriel. Well, she is not our Galadriel yet, but thankfully, between dropping her rotten attitude and buying a clue, she is turning into a richer character that we can start to feel invested in. She was also given a moment in which to choose who she will be. Will she alloy herself with evil under the pretext that she can keep it good? Well, goodish. Well, maybe not horrendously vile. Praise be that she rejects the literal devil's bargain. I've been awake since before the breaking of the first silence. Well, crap. That sentence gave me a bit of an existential crisis. Glad it gave her a full-on terror attack and she fought to what would have been her death had Elrond not pulled her from the river. The parallels between this choice and her later choice when offered that same amount of power by Frodo was so well conceived and constructed. Think of how great the impulse to seize that power must be, if even she feared her ability to resist it a second time. It is such a giddy surprise each time the showrunners add depth to movies I've watched at least a dozen times. One could even say they were blending them as well. And Halbrand. I'm sure it came as a stunning disappointment to all the fans who thought Poppy was Sauron, that it is in fact our man Halbrand. I'd do a little victory lap, but it would feel unearned. I think the showrunners told us over and over again that he was Sauron since he was introduced. It was great fun having them toss all the red herrings at us. I hope they maintain this level of playfulness and engagement with the audience. And the rings. I have to say, after the mousetrap level of intensity that went into crafting these, I was a bit taken aback that the rings have the look of something a child could fish out of the bottom of a box of cereal. We had better prizes back in my day during the first stage. Gil-galad was obviously getting the red one. Galadriel is eventually getting the clear one, and Elrond is eventually getting the blue one. I wonder if they will be simply given by the start of next season, or if we will get to see what leads Gil-galad to bestow the rings. And finally, some stray thoughts about the episode. Now that we're mostly done finding out about why Gandalf loves Harfoots, I hope beyond hope that next season brings us much more solid wizards and Harfoot adventures, and much less Harfoot flip-flopping anyway. I could not help but notice that the main Fire Sister looked an awful lot like the Witch King of Angmar when she was busy disintegrating. Did you notice that the Eye of Sauron appears in the molten metal for the rings just before the pour happens? Elrond is an orphan, Poppy's an orphan. They're both very loyal friends. Who else is excited to see Rune next season? It seems like Beric is still digging with his hooves trying to find a seal door. Remember, kids, don't accept unasked for gifts. Namarie, Gail. Gail, great thoughts as always.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. Yes, I wonder if Beric is digging, or I wonder if he's still riding very quickly to try and find a seal door. Because, as I say, a notable absence here that he is still trapped under rubble, I suspect, as well as not really seeing the Southlanders either.
And we didn't see our favourite elf again.
Yep. And yes, that look of banishing the servants of Sauron back to the shadow, they certainly did have that look of the ring wraiths as well. But given that they come from the mortal kings, I'm guessing it's not that, but it might be the same world that they inhabit or have come from as well.
Yeah.
So really good spot there around that.
Absolutely. I also love, as you mentioned, the moment where we saw that eye of Sauron as the rings were melting. It definitely caught that too. Great stuff, and thanks so much again for your thoughts, Gail. We also have some feedback over on Facebook. First up, Victor Von Doom says, "Will the real Sauron please stand up? Loved the reveals and switches in this finale. Will Prince Durin take the ring and usurp his father?"
Interesting, yes.
Yeah,
actually, another notable absence is the dwarves in this episode.
Yeah, Elrond shut out of the dwarves, so we don't know exactly what's happening with them. I think the way I would see it playing out possibly is they will learn of the rings of power, the three that have been created for the elves, and ask for them to be created in exchange for the mithril, so that they can have powerful rings themselves. I think that might be the way that it's going, whether it's Prince Durin taking a ring or getting a ring so that he can overthrow his father, or whether it's just a deal that's being struck between the dwarves and the elves. I think that's kind of set up this season, that there is a relationship there, so that they can build on that in the second season. It'll be very interesting to see how they do it.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Victor. Dan Lee says, "It's been a pleasure to see how passionate you guys have been about the series. Sadly, for the most part, I've felt the opposite. This finale, however, was absolutely wonderful, and I ate up every bit of it. It took 8 episodes, but I finally feel invested and eagerly await season 2. Excellent stuff. Thanks, Dan. That's great that the final episode has maybe, brought that context from the previous episodes, but also got you invested for a season 2.
Yeah.
I think it is as well very much reintroducing people to this world of Middle Earth and to the I say new races, but I mean, things like the Southlanders. Yeah. There's a lot to sort of set up here. Yeah. So, sometimes it can feel very exposition heavy. And maybe, it depends what you like from your visuals, doesn't it, as well? I quite like sweeping vistas and sort of powerful music as well. But also the intimacy, I think. And Absolutely. That certainly came through in this episode. Yeah. So, I'm glad there is an investment there, Dan. And thank you. Yes. As we always say, we never like to knock shows on TV podcast industries, even if we don't ultimately enjoy them. And we have had a few of those, with a film, involving 4 superheroed, people against a mechanical tyrant.
Yes. Yeah, but also a couple of TV shows that never made it to TV podcast industries because we realized we couldn't be passionate and interested in where they were going with the story. So that's kind of the position we take. We start out hoping that it's going to be as good as we want it to be. So we're not going to be negative about something based on where we think the show is going. We're going to look at it, see that it's coming from the best place, and that these people want to deliver something great. If you're setting up a show for 5 seasons, you hope that they have a plan that's going to deliver on a great story, because if it doesn't get a great story, it doesn't get a second season. So regardless of how much money is behind it. So I'm really glad that this has tied it up at the end of the season for you. I hope with this eighth episode having you on board that you feel a bit more invested in the first 7 episodes as well. Maybe it's given you a thought of how they were setting up this final episode. Because again, without those 7 episodes, it wouldn't have been as impactful to have this episode. Interestingly, an interview with both the showrunners this week, where they talked about the fact that season 2 may follow a more familiar path for people that do know the stories, but they felt that they needed the first season to kind of set up all the characters in the world and this experience so that you can fall in love with some of the characters. Certainly the Harfoots, for example, are characters that I've absolutely fallen in love with, and I want to see how they play out. The Southlanders as characters themselves, I'm really intrigued to see where they go in the second season. But if it had started out with them already in Gondor, I wouldn't have understood what they'd gone through to get there if we'd already had Mordor established in the world. I think all of that stuff has been really, really good this season. Yeah,
excellent stuff. Thanks Dan, for your thoughts. Will Madrick says, a great episode and series overall, but there are a few things that bother me. I really like the Harfoots, despite the names not matching up with lore, and the Stranger, but it was really obvious it was Gandalf who isn't supposed to be around until the Third Age. So that was a bit frustrating, although I think I can get over that. I also didn't really get the point of NMN. Who were they supposed to be? However, on the good side, I thought they played the Halbrand stuff really well, and Celebrimbor's seduction was perfect. Felt really sincere, and you just have to say it's great acting. The emotions of the elves generally just felt really perfect. It's taken me a while to get into their storyline, but feels like the most powerful arc going into the second season. One final thing, which is pretty obvious, but has held the season together. Morfydd Clark is so good.
She really was.
Absolutely will. Could not agree with you more. I think she was superb, in particular in this episode, but even, through the other episodes of this season. And I think, interestingly, with the Stranger, I think with that line, always follow your nose, it certainly hints at Gandalf. But again, I wonder whether there is a little bit of red herring going on here. Maybe this is a normal wizard saying. It's one of the skills they learn, or one of the powers is that they can really follow their nose like a hunting dog or something, and maybe that's just that kind of thing around this, because I feel that even though we've had this reveal of the Stranger now definitely being the one of the Istari, that is about as definite as we can be with this, because they don't have the Silmarillion rights, so can't use any of the names there. So you just wonder, I think as Derek mentioned earlier in the podcast, are they going to reopen negotiations to try and use that source as well? So I'm still not sure whether it is obvious, but also I just wonder if it is red herring obvious, and this isn't really Gandalf, because you're right, it would be a big change, but if they don't have the rights to the names of the Istari that are in this age, they have to be creative.
Or are there any? I don't think there are any actually Istari in this age, so, or at least they weren't on Middle Earth. But it is really interesting. Yeah, the fact that they didn't say his name by the end of the episode still means to me, I'm not 100% sure, but they are heavily tipping the nose at it being Gandalf. Good stuff, and I'm glad you really enjoyed the season overall, Will, as well. We got some feedback in from Brandy Elise Anderson, who says, nice try there, Rings of Power, but there was no way I was going to believe the Stranger was Sauron. Couldn't be, as I called it being Halbrand in episode 3. But even if I hadn't already known it, I mean, come on, he was made the King of Mordor last episode. Very true, very true. That's true. Everybody just instantly agreed that Halbrand was the King of Mordor very quickly, King of the Southlands at least. Brandy continues, I know the wizard is Gandalf, but until they say so, I'm holding all hope that it's a different wizard and that his relationship with Nori inspires Gandalf's relationship with Bilbo and Frodo. They made Galadriel's brother so creepy in this episode. I really expected to find out how Isildur survived this episode. I thought the finale would have the audience knowing, like we don't already, Isildur survived, even if his friend and family don't know. Yeah, that's a point as well, Brandy. Yeah, we did mention that the missing Southlanders throughout this, including Isildur, did seem odd that we wouldn't have had some kind of reference to it. But I suppose leaving them on that sour note almost that they've lost Isildur. There's a great moment with his friend on the ship. You can see that he's almost regretting his decision to go to Middle-earth on his own because he's lost his two best friends, the ones he grew up with, the ones that he joined up in this force with for the Númenóreans. And you can see the regret on his face that he's returning and nobody else has come back with him. So I did like that, but it's not a surprise. We will see Isildur back in a future season.
Yes, and I totally agree with you around the Gandalf element here. Again, I do think it might be red herring and it might be
somebody else. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think, again, it's just, it seems with rights issues, they're possibly in a little bit of a corner unless Radagast can be involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe they can use Radagast if they want to. It could be, yeah, like, you know, the fact that he regrew the orchard, you know, indicating that he's closer to nature than maybe Gandalf was. That could be Radagast, but we just don't know right now. But I know there is absolutely the feeling where everybody's going, this is definitely Gandalf. But we did that earlier on in the season, and they've messed with our expectations of the show. So just don't know where they're going, but excited to see where it's going to be next season.
Yep, thanks so much, Brandy. And finally, Jamie Lawson says, a great finale to the season. On the whole, the episodes got better as the season went on, with all the various threads finally pulled together at the end with various outcomes. I can't wait now till the second series. Mm-hmm. Great stuff, Jamie. Yeah, I would totally agree with you. I mean, I thought the first episode was pretty epic. And seeing all the sort of the great war between the Valinor and the forces of Morgoth. But I agree. I think they told the story and gradually pulled it together tight like a shoelace. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
So thanks, Jamie.
Excellent stuff. Thanks, Jamie, and thanks everybody else for your feedback on Rings of Power. While we won't be doing another Ring of Power podcast for a while, if you do want to send in your thoughts, you can always email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or continue the discussion over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. If you're just getting into the show and want to share your thoughts about any of the episodes, we have spoiler posts over there for every episode of every show that we're covering, and you can pop on over there and share them with us.
Yes, so a big thanks to all who have sent in their feedback again. Remember, if you aren't already, please subscribe and share the podcast, because sharing the podcast is, of course, sharing the love.
Yes.
You can also support us over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries or over on buymeacoffee.com/TVPI.
Yes. We have been heavily into lots and lots of shows on TV Podcast Industries over the last few weeks. Just finished our finale of She-Hulk, the Marvel TV show over on Disney+. Finished our coverage of The Wonderful Sandman quite recently as well. This is the last episode of The Rings of Power, and we're currently just kicking off our coverage of the DC show Pennyworth, which is from the same creators as Gotham. So something that we covered right back at the start of our podcasting career, really, on Gotham TV podcast before we even had TV Podcast Industries. So excited to be back in that interesting world of DC comic books over there. But lots and lots of stuff that we're covering at the moment. Next time we're doing fantasy, I think, would be Wheel of Time. No release date for Wheel of Time season 2 just yet, but I know at New York Comic Con they had their first view of what season 2 may look like. Very different to Lord of the Rings, with the Wheel of Time, even though it is fantasy and is on Prime Video. John and Chris, our other host, have both read a lot of Wheel of Time, know a lot about the characters. I'm the newbie on that one, but I do enjoy chatting about that because I do like a good fantasy series. So looking forward to coming back for the Wheel of Time. And of course, we will be back whenever the Rings of Power returns. We will be back here talking about it on TV Podcast Industries.
Absolutely. And coming up in October, we will be covering Marvel's Werewolf by Night.
Oh, yes, we will.
As well for the spooky season, as well as into November, there is the release of Wakanda Forever, the second Black Panther movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah. We also have 2 roundups as well, one for She-Hulk, and also one that we have kind of we forgot about in many respects, or we just couldn't find the time to do it. So we'll have to merge it in when we do the She-Hulk roundup as well. But we will be doing the roundup for the Umbrella Academy pub quiz as well.
Yes.
There. So we haven't forgotten about you, fellow Brollies. There will be the answers to the questions of the Umbrella Academy
and the winners,
pub quiz.
Yeah, and the winners of the goodies for the Umbrella Academy pub quiz and for the She-Hulk Attorney at Law bar exam as well.
Yes.
Yes, both of those coming up. We didn't do a tavern quiz for Lord of the Rings of Power, though.
Yes, we should have, the Prancing Horse, we should have done.
Prancing Pony, yes.
Sorry, the Prancing Pony, yes.
Maybe we'll do that for second season.
Maybe.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks so much for joining us throughout the season. There has been so many podcasts out there about Lord of the Rings, so really happy that you chose to join us on TV Podcast Industries for The Rings of Power. We'll speak to you again next time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, fellow ringers, for joining us. It is a pleasure having chit-chatted about season 1 of The Rings of Power with you. Remember, in the meantime, keep watching, keep listening, and keep sailing west.
Absolutely. Stay on that path.
Bye.
Bye.